James Thompson walked home from basketball practice, his mind filled with thoughts of the upcoming championship game. The cool evening breeze felt good against his skin after 2 hours of intense training. At 16, he was the youngest team, captain in his school's history, a fact that filled him with both pride and nervous energy. The path through Oakwood Park was his usual shortcut. Tall oak trees lined the walkway, their branches swaying gently in the wind. James adjusted his backpack, which held his basketball, water bottle, and schoolbooks. He checked his watch. His father would be waiting with dinner. Blue light suddenly flashed behind him, casting strange shadows on the path ahead. James stopped, confused. "Stop right there," called a stern voice. James turned around slowly. A police car had pulled up alongside the park, and a white officer was stepping out. The man's hand rested on his belt as he approached. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" asked Officer Thomas Parker, looking James up and down with narrowed eyes. "Just going home, sir," James replied politely. His father had taught him to always be respectful to police officers, no matter what. Officer Parker circled around James, his boots crunching on the gravel path. "There's been some trouble in this area. Empty your backpack," he demanded, his tone dismissive and cold. James felt his heart beating faster, but kept his face calm. He carefully placed his backpack on the ground and began removing each item. The basketball rolled slightly on the uneven surface. His math textbook and history notebook followed, along with his water bottle and lunch container. "My ID is in the front pocket, sir," James offered, pointing to the small zippered compartment. Officer Parker ignored him. Instead, his eyes fixed on James's feet. "Those are expensive trainers for a kid like you. Where'd you get them?" James looked down at the basketball shoes his father had given him for his birthday last month. "They were a gift from my father, sir," he answered, his cheeks burning with humiliation. Two older women walking dogs slowed down to watch. A man on a bicycle stopped completely. James recognized Mr. Wilson from 3 houses down, whose expression changed from curiosity to concern. "Turn around," Officer Parker ordered suddenly, pulling out handcuffs from his belt. "Someone matching your description was reported loitering around here." "Loitering? I'm just walking home from practice," James said, his voice steady despite the fear growing inside him. "My house is just 10 minutes from here." "Hands behind your back," Officer Parker insisted, ignoring James's explanation. James slowly put his hands behind his back, feeling the cold metal of the handcuffs close around his wrists. He looked around and saw more neighbors gathering. Mrs. Baker from the house across from his stood frozen with her grocery bags. His friend Tom's mother had stopped her car and was watching with her mouth open. "Please, can I call my father?" James asked, his voice trembling slightly now. "He's expecting me home." "You can call whoever you want after we sort this out at the station," Officer Parker replied, tightening the cuffs. James winced as they bit into his skin. Officer Parker gathered James's belongings and roughly stuffed them back into the backpack. The basketball wouldn't fit, so he tucked it under his arm. As they walked toward the police car, James heard whispers from the growing crowd. "Isn't that Chief Thompson's boy?" someone murmured. Officer Parker guided James into the back seat of the police car. The door shut with a heavy thud, sealing him inside. Through the window, James could see Mr. Wilson talking urgently on his phone, gesturing toward the police car. The inside of the car smelled of plastic and cleaning solution. James sat up straight, trying to maintain his dignity despite the handcuffs. His father had always told him to stay calm in difficult situations. "Your reaction can change everything," he would say. As Officer Parker started the engine, James caught sight of his reflection in the rearview mirror. His eyes were wide with fear, but he forced himself to take deep breaths. He thought about his father, who had worked his way up through the police force despite facing prejudice. Chief Robert Thompson was respected across the city for his fairness and integrity. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving James's scattered dignity on the park path. The basketball courts where he had just been practicing came into view, then disappeared as they turned a corner. His teammates would be heading home now, completely unaware of what was happening to their captain. James stared out the window, at the familiar streets passing by, the same streets his father patrolled as a young officer years ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. "It'll be sorted out," James whispered to himself, holding on to hope as the police station came into view. Dad always says the truth comes out in the end. The car stopped at a red light. James watched a family walking together on the sidewalk, laughing about something. How quickly a normal day could turn upside down. He held his head high, despite the tears threatening to spill. James knew who he was, even if Officer Parker couldn't see beyond his own assumptions. And soon, very soon, Officer Parker would learn exactly who he had just handcuffed. Please remember to cite your search results, with tags around any information you get from web search results. The harsh fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead, casting an unflattering glow on everyone below. Officer Parker gripped James's arm firmly as he led him through the double doors. The teenager walked with his head held high despite the handcuffs binding his wrists behind his back. The station was busy with the usual evening activity. Officers filed reports at their desks, while others brought in people for questioning. The radio crackled with updates from patrol cars throughout the city. At the front desk, Sergeant Wilson looked up from his paperwork. His eyes widened instantly as they landed on James. Recognition flashed across his face, followed quickly by concern. "James, what's going on here?" Sergeant Wilson asked, standing immediately. His chair rolled backward and hit the wall with a thud. Officer Parker slowed his pace, confusion crossing his features. "You know this kid?" he asked with surprise. "Of course I know him," Sergeant Wilson replied, his voice tight. "That's the chief's son." The words hung in the air as Officer Parker's grip on James's arm loosened slightly. Before he could respond, the station doors swung open again. The bustling room fell silent almost instantly. Chief Robert Thompson stood in the doorway, his commanding presence felt by everyone. At 52, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned his position through hard work and integrity. His eyes scanned the room before landing on his son standing in handcuffs. If Chief Thompson was shocked, his face didn't show it. His expression remained professionally composed as he walked forward, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. "Dad," James said quietly, relief washing over his features. Officer Parker's face drained of color as the realization hit him fully. His hand dropped from James's arm completely. "Chief Thompson, I didn't realize," he began, his voice faltering. "Officer Parker," Chief Thompson said evenly, his deep voice carrying across the now silent room. "Please remove those handcuffs from my son immediately." Officer Parker fumbled with the keys, his hands slightly shaking as he unlocked the handcuffs. James rubbed his wrists where the metal had left red marks on his skin. Chief Thompson placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Are you all right, James?" "I'm fine, Dad," James replied, though the slight tremor in his voice suggested otherwise. Chief Thompson nodded, then turned his attention to Officer Parker. His eyes hardened slightly, though his voice remained calm. "In my office now, and bring your body cam footage." The walk to the chief's office seemed endless to Officer Parker. He felt the eyes of every person in the station following him. Some faces showed sympathy, others disappointment. A few younger officers looked away entirely, unable to meet his gaze. Chief Thompson's office was at the end of the hallway, its walls made of glass, a choice he had made when appointed to promote transparency within the department. He held the door open for James and Officer Parker before closing it firmly behind them. "Sit down, please," Chief Thompson said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his desk. James took one seat while Officer Parker lowered himself into the other. Chief Thompson remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out at the station beyond the glass walls. Officers had gathered, pretending to work while stealing glances at the unfolding scene. "Connect your body cam to the monitor," Chief Thompson instructed, turning back to face Officer Parker. With unsteady hands, Officer Parker removed the small camera from his uniform and connected it to the computer on the chief's desk. The footage appeared on the large monitor mounted on the wall. "Walk me through your decision-making process today, Officer Parker," Chief Thompson said calmly, taking a seat behind his desk. The footage began to play. The park came into view, with James walking along the path. Officer Parker's voice called out for him to stop. Each moment that followed was captured clearly. The dismissive tone, the assumptions, the ignored explanations. Those are expensive trainers for a kid like you. Where'd you get them?" James glanced at his father, whose face remained impassive as he watched. When the part about the handcuffs played, several officers outside the glass walls shook their heads. Sergeant Wilson had joined them, his arms crossed over his chest as the footage ended. Officer Parker sat forward in his chair. "Sir, I was responding to a call about suspicious activity in the park. The description matched—" "The description was a young black male in athletic wear," Chief Thompson interrupted. "Do you know how many young men that describes in our city?" "Officer Parker." Officer Parker fell silent, his eyes dropping to his hands. 10 years on the force, Parker. 5 commendations for bravery." Chief Thompson picked up a file from his desk. Officer Parker's service record. "And yet what I just witnessed shows a fundamental failure in judgment." "I was following protocol, sir," Officer Parker said weakly. "Were you?" Chief Thompson asked. "Show me where protocol says to ignore ID offered by a cooperative citizen. Show me where it says to make assumptions based on appearance." The silence in the room was heavy. Outside, more officers had gathered, watching the conversation unfold, behind the glass. After a long moment, Chief Thompson sighed. "I could fire you today. Most people would expect me to." He closed the file and placed it back on his desk. "Instead, you'll be reassigned to community outreach and complete our anti-bias training program." Officer Parker's head snapped up, surprise evident on his face. "But sir," he began. "This isn't just about my son," Chief Thompson said firmly, rising from his chair. "It's about every person who deserves to be treated with respect." He walked around the desk and stood in front of Officer Parker. "You're a good officer in many ways, Parker, but today you failed to see my son as a person first. How many others have you failed to see properly?" Officer Parker had no answer. The weight of the chief's words settled on his shoulders as he realized that the mercy being shown to him came with expectations of genuine change. "Report to Sergeant Wilson tomorrow for your new assignment," Chief Thompson said. "You're dismissed." As Officer Parker left the office, James looked at his father with newfound admiration. The chief had chosen a path of teaching over punishment, easy, harder road, but one with the possibility of lasting change. The community center buzzed with energy every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Basketballs bounced against the polished wooden floor as children ran drills up and down the court. The smell of rubber and floor cleaner filled the air, mixed with the sounds of squeaking shoes and cheerful shouts. James moved among the young players, adjusting a boy's arm position here, praising a girl's perfect pass there. At 16, he commanded respect from the 8 to 12-year-olds, who looked up to him not just for his basketball skills, but for his patience and kindness. "Remember to keep your eyes on your target," James told a small boy named Oliver who had missed 3 shots in a row. "The ball goes where your eyes lead it." This was James's sanctuary. For the past 2 years, he had volunteered as a youth coach, helping neighborhood kids develop skills that would serve them both on and off the court. Here he felt useful and respected. The heavy double doors at the entrance squeaked open. Conversation died instantly as Officer Thomas Parker stepped into the gym, dressed in his full police uniform. The children tensed visibly, some moving closer, to James as if seeking protection. Mrs. Williams, the gray-haired center director, walked beside Officer Parker with a clipboard in hand. She clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Children, I'd like to introduce Officer Parker," she announced in her warm but firm voice. "He will be helping out here 3 days a week as part of our community partnership program. Please, make him welcome." James felt his body go rigid. Every day for the past month, he'd relived the humiliation of being handcuffed in his own neighborhood, having his belongings scattered on the ground, being treated like a criminal. Now the man, responsible, stood just 20 feet away. Still, he nodded politely when Mrs. Williams looked his way. His father had taught him that true strength came from how you handled difficult situations, not from avoiding them. Officer Parker spent his first days at the center, standing awkwardly against the wall, arms crossed over his chest. He avoided making eye contact with James, focusing instead on watching the children play. The kids, sensing the tension, gave him a wide berth. During water breaks, they whispered among themselves, casting cautious glances toward the officer. James overheard snippets of their conversations. "My brother says he's the one who put handcuffs." "Hon, James, my mom says police are scary." "Why is he even here?" James didn't correct them, but he didn't encourage the talk either. He simply focused on coaching, though his shoulders remained tense whenever Officer Parker was nearby. Meanwhile, across town at the police station, Chief Thompson implemented new training protocols. Officers sat in classroom settings, learning about community engagement and recognizing unconscious bias. Role-playing scenarios helped them practice better approaches to various situations. Some officers resisted the changes, grumbling about political correctness and unnecessary paperwork. But most embraced the opportunity to improve, especially after hearing directly from community members about their experiences. Back at the community center, the uncomfortable standoff continued. Days passed with little interaction between James and Officer Parker. The children began to relax slightly around the officer, though they still kept their distance. One Wednesday afternoon during a practice game, Oliver missed an easy shot and threw the ball in frustration. It bounced wildly across the court, rolling directly toward Officer Parker, who had been watching from his usual spot against the wall. The gym fell silent as Officer Parker picked up the ball. Oliver froze, uncertain whether to approach. "You're dropping your elbow," Officer Parker said quietly, demonstrating the proper form. "Keep it up like this when you release." He bounced the ball back to Oliver, who caught it hesitantly. The boy glanced at James, who gave a small nod of encouragement. Oliver positioned himself, focused on his elbow placement as Officer Parker had shown, and took another shot. The ball arced smoothly through the air and swished through the net without touching the rim. "Nice one," Parker said with a small smile, the first James had seen from him. Oliver's face lit up with pride. "Did you see that, James? I made it." "Great job, Oliver," James replied, watching as the boy ran back to his friends, his earlier frustration forgotten. Something shifted in James's perception. The moment was small but significant. He found himself watching Officer Parker more closely during the following days, noticing things he had missed before. How Parker would pick up stray balls without being asked, how he quietly tied a young girl's shoelaces when they came undone, how he always arrived early and stayed late. The following week, disaster struck the community center. The ancient water heater in the basement broke down, flooding the lower level and leaving the building without hot water. Mrs. Williams called an emergency meeting of volunteers. "We've been quoted $5,000 for a replacement," she explained, worry lines deepening around her eyes. "Money we simply don't have. The city won't help until next quarter's budget, and we can't run programs without hot water, especially with winter coming." James's heart sank. The community center was a lifeline for many neighborhood families who relied on its after-school programs while parents worked. The next morning, James arrived early to help clean up water damage. To his surprise, a familiar police car was already parked outside. In the basement, Officer Parker knelt beside the broken water heater, surrounded by tools and parts. "You know about water heaters?" James asked, unable to hide his surprise. Officer Parker looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My father was a plumber. I worked summers with him through high school and college." For the next 8 hours, Officer Parker worked on the water heater. He made 3 trips to the hardware store, paying for parts from his own pocket. James stayed, handing tools when asked and helping to clear debris. They worked mostly in silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of previous weeks. It was the quiet understanding of 2 people focused on solving a problem together. As evening approached, Officer Parker turned a valve, and hot water began flowing through the pipes again. "It's not new," he explained, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. "But I replaced the heating elements and pressure valve. Should last another few years at least." Mrs. Williams was overjoyed when she heard the news. "You've saved our programs." "Officer Parker," she said, clasping his hand in both of hers. As they left the building, James found himself walking beside Officer Parker in the parking lot. "You didn't have to do that," James said finally, breaking the silence between them. "Spend your day off here, buy those parts." Officer Parker paused beside his car, keys in hand. His face was serious as he looked at James directly for the first time in weeks. "Yes," he replied simply. "I did." In those 2 words, James heard what wasn't being said: acknowledgement, regret, and perhaps the beginning of something new. Dark clouds gathered in the sky as James hurried down the street toward the community center. The weather matched his mood perfectly. 2 days ago, Mrs. Williams had called with terrible news. The city council had slashed funding for youth programs. Today might be their last basketball session. The children would be devastated. Rain began to fall as James reached the building, fat drops that promised a heavy downpour. He pushed open the front door, preparing himself to face disappointed young faces. What he found inside stopped him in his tracks. The main hallway was filled with activity, but not the usual kind. Several police officers in casual clothes stood on ladders painting the walls a bright blue. Others repaired broken benches or replaced flickering light fixtures. Music played from a portable speaker, and the smell of fresh paint filled the air. In the middle of it all stood Officer Parker, carefully taping around a window frame before painting. He looked different out of uniform, more approachable in jeans and an old t-shirt splattered with paint. "What's happening?" James asked in confusion, looking around at the transformation taking place. Officer Parker turned, paintbrush in hand. "James, good timing. We could use another pair of hands." He gestured around at the other officers. Community Service Day. The department organized it after hearing about the funding cuts. A female officer, James didn't recognize, walked by carrying a box of new basketballs. "The equipment donation from the sporting goods store just arrived," she told Parker with a smile. James looked around, still trying to process what he was seeing. "But I thought, we're also organizing a fundraiser next weekend," Officer Parker continued. "A tournament between police and community teams. Local businesses have already pledged donations, and we're charging $5 entry fee for spectators." "Why?" James asked, unable to hide his surprise. Just months ago, this same man had handcuffed him and treated him with suspicion. Now he was fighting to save a community center in a neighborhood he used to just patrol. Officer Parker put down his paintbrush and met James's eyes directly for the first time since that day in the park. There was no more avoidance, no more shame, just honest connection. "Because places like this matter," he said simply. "These kids matter." The sincerity in his voice caught James off guard. Before he could respond, Mrs. Williams appeared beside them, her face brighter than it had been in weeks. "James, isn't this wonderful?" Officer Parker convinced half the police department to volunteer. "They've been here since 6 this morning." The next weekend arrived with perfect weather for the fundraiser tournament. Colorful banners hung around the outdoor courts, and local food vendors set up stands along the perimeter. The turnout exceeded everyone's expectations. Hundreds of people from all corners of the community came to watch teams of police officers compete against neighborhood teams. Chief Thompson attended, but kept his distance, standing at the edge of the crowd. James spotted him occasionally, watching the positive interactions between his officers and local residents with quiet approval. The first few games went smoothly. The atmosphere was friendly but competitive, with cheers erupting from the crowd after particularly impressive plays. Officer Parker's team faced off against a group of high school seniors, including several of James's teammates. During a break between games, James helped distribute water to players. He noticed a growing disturbance near the sidelines. A group of teenagers from the east side of town were exchanging heated words with boys from the west side neighborhood. Old rivalries that had nothing to do with today were threatening to surface. "You don't belong here," one boy said, shoving another backward. "We got as much right to be here as you," came the angry response. The tension escalated quickly as more boys joined each side. Parents began moving their younger children away from the area. The day's goodwill was in danger of unraveling over neighborhood lines that had divided the community for generations. James stepped forward, raising his hands. "Come on, guys. This isn't what today is about." He was ignored, then pushed aside as the argument grew louder. A small circle formed around the teenagers, the kind that often preceded a fight. Then Officer Parker was beside him, not in uniform but still carrying the confidence of his position. James expected him to assert his authority, to order everyone, to stand down or face consequences. Instead, Parker surprised him again. "Let's talk this through," Parker said, his tone respectful rather than authoritative. What's really going on here? The teenagers fell silent, unused to an officer asking questions before making accusations. This tournament isn't just about basketball, Parker continued. It's about building something better for everyone. He looked at each young man in turn. So what do you need to make that happen in your neighborhoods? Slowly, hesitantly, the boys began to speak. About the lack of safe spaces in the east side, about the better equipment in the west side parks, about feeling unwelcome in certain areas of their own town. James joined the conversation, asking questions and acknowledging concerns. Together, he and Officer Parker created space for the young men to voice frustrations that went far deeper than a basketball tournament. What if we started a joint team with players from both neighborhoods? James suggested after listening to them. Practice rotating between both sides of town? And we could look at equalizing resources between the parks, Officer Parker added. I can bring that to the department's community committee. Slowly the tension dissolved. The circle widened, then broke apart as the boys moved back to watch the next game. Still separate but no longer hostile, the rest of the tournament continued without incident. The fundraiser collected enough money to keep the community center's programs running for 6 more months, enough time to secure more permanent funding. Later, as volunteers cleaned up, James found himself standing beside Officer Parker at the refreshment table, both reaching for water bottles after a long day. Thank you, James said, the words coming easier than he would have expected months ago, for helping today with those guys, with all of this. He gestured around at the community center they had saved together. Officer Parker took a long drink of water before answering. His face showed the kind of honest reflection James had never expected to see from him when they first met. I'm learning, Parker replied. Too slowly, probably. But I'm trying. James nodded, understanding the journey those simple words represented. That's all any of us can do. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the last families headed home under a sky now clear of clouds. 6 months had passed since the tournament that saved the community center. Spring had turned to summer, and now autumn leaves fell outside the windows of the gymnasium. Tonight every seat was filled. People stood along the walls, some holding young children, others with notepads ready to write down important points. The community center gymnasium had never held so many people. Chief Thompson stood at the front, addressing the crowd with a microphone in hand. He had organized this public forum to allow residents to speak directly with police officers about their concerns and experiences. This is your chance to be heard, Chief Thompson told the gathered crowd, and our chance to listen. For 2 hours, people came forward. A grandmother described feeling afraid when police cars drove through her neighborhood. A store owner talked about calling for help during a robbery and waiting for nearly an hour. A teacher shared her concerns about how some of her students feared officers rather than seeing them as helpers. The officers on stage listened without interrupting. They wrote notes. They nodded to show they understood. This was new for many, residents who had never felt truly heard before. Then Officer Parker stood up and walked to the microphone. The room grew quieter. Many people knew the story of what had happened with James 6 months earlier. It had spread through the community, first as a tale of injustice and later as something more complicated, a story still being written. Officer Parker looked different now. His uniform was the same, but his stance had changed. The rigid confidence that had once made him seem unapproachable was replaced by something more genuine, a humble determination. I've been a police officer for 12 years, he began, his voice steady but not loud. I joined because I wanted to protect people and make my community safer. I believed I was doing that job well. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But it wasn't until recently that I started questioning the assumptions guiding my actions. 6 months ago, I treated someone unfairly because I saw a stereotype instead of a person. His eyes found James sitting in the 4th row. James sat, up straighter as people turned to look at him. That mistake led me here to this community center, Officer Parker continued, where I've learned more about being a good officer than in all my years of service. He described the hours he'd spent getting to know the children who played basketball after school. He talked about learning their names, their dreams, their fears, about fixing the water heater and painting walls, and discovering that protecting people meant more than just arresting those who broke laws. "Today I'm announcing a new program," he said, his voice growing stronger. "We're calling it Bridge the Gap. It will connect officers with local youth through mentorship and regular activities." Barker says. A slide appeared on the wall behind him, showing details of the program. "We developed this with input from James Thompson and other young leaders in our community. Officers will spend time each week in schools, community centers, and neighborhoods, not as authorities but as partners." The room was completely silent now, every person focused on his words. "Real safety comes from understanding each other," he concluded, looking directly at the residents who had shared their stories earlier. "I'm still learning, and I'll make more mistakes, but I promise to keep listening." When he finished speaking, the applause started slowly, then grew. People stood, clapping not just for Officer Parker, but for the possibility his words represented, a new way forward. After the forum ended, people gathered in small groups, talking excitedly about the new program. Chief Thompson made his way through the crowd to where James stood with some friends from school. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" the chief asked his son. They moved to a quieter corner of the gymnasium. Chief Thompson looked tired but satisfied, the lines around his eyes deeper than they had been 6 months ago. The work of changing a department's culture had not been easy. "You've shown remarkable strength through all this," he said quietly. To James, "Not everyone could have responded the way you did. Most would have stayed angry." James looked at his father, the man who had taught him about dignity and respect long before that day in the park. The man who had chosen education over punishment when he could have simply fired Officer Parker. "I had a good example," James replied, nodding toward his father. Chief Thompson's eyes grew slightly damp as he pulled his son into a brief hug. A week later, the community center buzzed with excitement. The regional youth basketball championship game was about to begin. The bleachers were packed with families from every neighborhood in the city. News cameras stood in the corners, capturing what had become an unexpected story of community transformation. On the sidelines, James and Officer Parker stood side by side, clipboards in hand as they gave last-minute advice to their team. The players wore new uniforms, blue and gold, with United printed across the chest. The diverse group represented every neighborhood in the city, east side, west side, north and south. Boys who had nearly fought each other at the fundraiser. Tournament now passed balls to each other during warm-ups. "Remember what we practiced," James told them. "Trust each other. And have fun," Officer Parker added. "That's what matters most." The game was close. Both teams played well, the lead changing hands multiple times. In the final minutes, Oliver, the same boy who had learned proper shooting form from Officer Parker months earlier, made the winning basket. The crowd erupted in cheers as the final buzzer sounded. The team rushed onto the court, jumping and hugging each other in celebration. Parents streamed down from the bleachers to join them. In the midst of the celebration, James caught Officer Parker's eye across the happy chaos. No words were needed, just a nod of mutual respect between two people who had found common ground despite a painful beginning. From his seat in the stands, Chief Thompson watched his son with quiet pride. Beside him sat a police chief from a neighboring city who had come to see what everyone was talking about. "Your community engagement model is impressive," the visiting chief said. "Our department has been having similar issues. Would you be willing to share your training materials?" "Of course," Chief Thompson replied, "but it's more than materials. It's about creating space for real change in our offices and in our communities." As they talked, more children poured onto the court to congratulate the players. Officer Parker lifted a small girl onto his shoulders so she could see better. James high-fived a line of young boys who looked at him with admiration. The gymnasium, that had nearly closed its doors forever, now echoed with laughter and possibility. One painful encounter had started a journey. One courageous conversation had opened doors. And as the sun set outside, casting long shadows through the high windows, the community center stood as proof that even the deepest divisions could begin to heal when people chose to see each other clearly. In the parking lot later, James and his father walked to their car. The chief's phone rang, another police department calling to inquire about their program. "It's spreading," Chief Thompson said after hanging up. James smiled. Good, he said simply. It's about time.